Welcome. We're late, but we're early. Next week we go on daylight savings time here in the United States. And so which time zone are we in now? Well, we are in mythological time, and we're going to be exploring tonight something that I know everybody really wants to understand because we're constantly wrestling with it here in unauthorized TV world, right? The sort of who's the good guy in which narrative that we're dealing with. I'm sure, and I sort of thought this through about what's the best way to explain what it is that we're going to try to explain to you today. Well, you're in the park talking to one of your friends, and you're, like in sympathy with each other beautifully, and then suddenly, I don't know, Donald Trump comes up, because it does, because I live in Obama's neighborhood, and so, Trump always comes up. And I've gotten very, very good at not reacting, I hope, because they are suddenly going to be describing somebody I've never seen. They're going to be talking about how crazy Trump is and how, don't you know he's, the evil person that's going to, fill in the blank of all the terrible things that are going to happen, like white supremacy, right? And flip side, well, actually Obama doesn't come up that much in conversation anymore, but say like anybody else, I know, one of my park conversations was comparing Marjorie Taylor Greene and what's her name, AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And in one version of the story, Marjorie Taylor Greene is completely insane, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is deeply compassionate and really cares about the people. Okay, I'm not sure I can say that Marjorie Taylor Greene is deeply compassionate, but she does seem to care about the people that she's representing. I am not going to be able to say whether or not I think Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is anything other than acting, which you could say MTG is doing too. Okay, so in fact, they mirror each other. That's what we need to understand today, where this mirroring comes from and why the one person that everyone sees as the hero and the compassionate, caring one, the opposite side sees as the villain. Welcome to the Mosaic Arc. Are you ready to be twinned? I'm quite nervous about this. We keep getting into rockier, stormier and stormier waters. I hope we can sail through this one without getting drowned.
The arc, is it sinking or is it just kept becoming a submarine? I don't know.
Actually, we'd be twinning the sailing above the waters and sailing under the waters. I think that, or now that just gave me the image of in whichever the Pirates of the Caribbean, they have to go to the end of the world and they have to flip the ship. Yes. I think that's we're ship flipping tonight. We're gonna show you how it works. And well, we keep promising that it will be to be continued, and I'm pretty sure this one's going to have to be continued in certain fashion, but definitely to be continued. That this is the pieces of the structure of the mythology that we've been trying to understand are coming together really beautifully. And those of you who have been waiting eagerly for the first act of Draco Alchemicus. Well, we're starting to think about pictures. But a lot of what we're going to be talking about tonight, and presumably in future episodes, is now very much feeding directly into the mythology that we're trying to craft into our story. So we appreciate your watching and appreciate your help in the comments to say whether or not we're making all of this make sense. We're looking at mirrors now. We're looking at the way the good and the bad flip.
It's a ship flip.
It's a ship flip. So how will we do this? We can do it the hard way or the easy way. Which do you think we should do?
Which one is the hard way? Which one's the easy way?
Well, the hard way is I stand up, go get Girard, and we start reading The Scapegoat, right? And I say, okay, I give you homework. And no, we've been, the team, the Draco team has been listening to a series of René Girard's lectures. It's I think about 20 years ago. And Girard is trying to explain this whole system of insights that he came to over the course of his career as a literary critic, starting it's like, I think I'm going backwards fashion, or not going in the right fashion, that he starts with problems of the violence and the sacred, and then moves into what he calls things hidden before the beginning of the world. I think, not quite. I've lost track of what order they're in. Then the scapegoat, and then I saw Satan fall like lightning. And there's certain concepts that he's trying to explain that he came to, in fact, over the course of decades, right? So it's a very revelatory experience listening to him talk about it. But there's also some concepts that we're starting to see, okay, these are actually helpful. If we're trying to write a myth, we need to know about the structure of mythology. And what he is uncovering is horrifying and comforting simultaneously, because you said, I find sort of revelation and knowledge and insight comforting, but you also start learning like what story we're actually in, and whether we can get out of it and how we can get out of it and such. So the hard way is, I say, we got to go listen to a lot of René Girard, start reading some really intense, literary analytical studies, know about Oedipus and who Cadmus of Thebes is, and dragons and mythological structures, and read the Bible. So that's the hard way.
Yeah, I don't think we should start the hard way.
You think we should give them a little bit of more mosaic intro to how we get how I get to the point where, as I'm reading René Girard's Scapegoat, I can't stop texting the poetry team going, this is it, he's the dragon. And then we say, no, he's not. And then we say, okay, what's going on here? I will take you back in time to 2006 in London, when I saw a series of ads in the subway. We'd just gotten off the plane. We were there for Christmas, and I saw these. We go, good, bad, bad, good. It's broccoli and cake, okay? And I saw this. It's a ad. They're very, very famous ads. They're sort of the phrasing being something like, everything depends on your perspective, or what if you could look at the world with a different eye, or something like that. It was HSBC, which I think is a bank. I don't care. There were these banner ads in the underground and all over London that Christmas, that were pointing out the problem of discernment, right? If you're looking at the broccoli cake, broccoli. Okay, it's like, okay, broccoli cake, and then the labels on the images make you have to do this kind of adjustment, right? So good broccoli, bad cake, okay, bad broccoli, good cake. And then you realize, actually, they're both, right? Obviously, broccoli is good for you. Cake may or may not be good for you, probably bad, right? Some people really hate broccoli. I always love broccoli, so I don't see how broccoli can be bad. But for some people, it's incredibly bitter and you don't want to eat it all. But cake, oh, always good. And we're in this like Ouroboros mirroring of evaluation, which I instantly recognized was the secret to all mythology. Oh no. I'm not sure I did. I mean, there were the interesting thing about the series is I think I did a little research on how they came up with the pairs, that they did a little crowdsourcing. This was back in 2006, which is interesting, asking people to suggest things that they found. It's interesting whether they're opposites or, well, this is the Girardian thing is going to help us here. This will help you make sense of René Girard. Why the pairs work, right? So broccoli and cake, maybe that's a little hard, but the next one, leader, follower, follower, leader. So we have the leader, it's a man in a suit, and he's obviously, they're in the city of London leading people in their financial advisements, right? And the follower is the guy wearing jeans and boots. Actually, you just see his feet. So his follower is just wearing jeans and boots. But, well, isn't that guy in the suit going to work in the corporate offices, in fact, simply following absolutely everybody else into the corporate world? And it's the guy in the jeans and the boots. He's the real leader. No. So which one is which?
It depends on your perspective. That's a point of view problem.
It's a point of view. You get in trouble sometimes using POV in your chat world, your channel, and people telling you don't know what POV is.
I know. They yell at me all the time. I don't know why. I make so many people uncomfortable.
Well, what is your point of view? What can be your point of view? Are you leader, follower, follower, leader? Leader, follower, follower, leader.
Everything is perspective.
Well, these, we're just going through these quickly. These were the examples I saw in the traditional, trendy, traditional. Yeah, so we have one with a guy with a tribal tattoo saying traditional. These are, particularly, I suppose Maori.
It's Polynesia.
Yeah. Okay, so very, very traditional designs, and to have it is, showing something significant and meaningful in a ancient culture. Trendy is the Mindy, the woman doing the henna stain on her hands. Well, okay, so it's trendy. I was getting Mindy a lot in 2000. Oh, actually, before that, they do it at Renaissance fairs and such, and you get your henna tattoo, which everybody says, oh, if you have it, in fact, as she's done it in the picture on your hands, on the tops of your hands, it wears off really quickly. The traditional way to do it is on your palms, because then the dye sticks around for like a whole week if you take care of it properly. So saying no, women getting the henna done is just a trend. Well, but you could say getting those tribal tattoos was trendy in 2006, and that the reason the women are getting the Mindy is for the traditional reasons of being, particularly for weddings, right? That you have your feet and your hands ornamented. And it's a sort of, have the all just women together having the Mindy done at the party before the bride gets, fully veiled and covered, so that, she's there to meet her husband for the first time, because she wouldn't have met him before, I suppose. Certainly that to have her hands and feet covered there it always felt to me when I got it very sort of special and sacred, even though I wasn't doing it at a wedding. So which is which? I'm not these.
Well, if you're 90s Madonna.
I'm not feeling like these are very difficult for you. It's too easy for you to see both sides here.
Well, yeah, I live right next door to Polynesia. Half my neighbors have those tattoos, and it's like there's these guys that come out and they've got their full face tattoos, and everyone, screams and worries about it. because the neighbors to the north, there's a taboo against tattooing in Asia. So you have to be, you're an organized crime if you've got tattoos, especially on your face, except for if you're Polynesian.
And then you're just being traditional and edgy. No, maybe
you're being traditional,
maybe these examples are just too old. Do you think it's? I mean, this was 2006. It was a fair time ago. I mean, there's one that's sort of bland and like holiday hell holiday, and it's whether you're camping or on a cruise. I think it's on a cruise. It's like a cruise ship with people on their sunbeds.
Cruise ships. Before COVID, that would have been see, this would have been harder before COVID. Now I think of cruise ships.
This is true.
PCR testing and national border closures.
I don't think these are spicy enough memes. I think we should go for it. I think we should go for some memes. So we got normal people and conspiracy theorists, You've all seen these.
No, that's good.
And now maybe we'll get some traction on this problem that we've all been living in one of these flip worlds for years now. Mm-hmm. The 2020 world, right? 2020, 2002. Well, what are we in 2023? I don't know. But that those of us who recognized, oh, look, finally the world's coming around to it, that the mask did nothing. I read an article this morning that I shared on my channel how the entire panic that happened in northern Italy was specific to certain parts of northern Italy. It had to do with the pollution and the breakdown of their healthcare system, the age of their population, and medical malpractice thanks to the procedures that they were using to ventilate people who had a cold. But I this one, the normal people in masks and their plastic face covers, and you can only see sunglasses and no face at all. Those are the normal people 2 years ago, right? And 3 years ago. And the conspiracy theorists are the ones actually simply celebrating Christmas with getting on with it. That we've been living in this mirror world like intensively for the past several years, and I'm wondering now whether it's we're kind of exhausted with this. It's watching things flip back and forth and back and forth. I think with the mask thing, I used this in the mask post that I did, but it was like in winter 2020, I think it was, to mask or not to mask, and I was just like, I can't believe we're living in this. I can't believe we lived in it for so long. I can't believe people are still wearing masks in like ordinary day circumstances. I was just at a reception.
I'm still telling people not to wear them.
Well, I was at a reception this evening, the British consulate, or his house, or the downtown high-rise version of the British consulate's home, and they had the staff masked.
The serfdom has its face covered. Sorry, I've got to laugh because that was very common. The help would have its face covered.
Well, they still do. I mean, I don't even think Illinois is under any kind of warning by now, and now we've made this normal. That's astonishing. And of course, you're saying, how did we get to this place where that kind of covering is considered polite? It'd be crazy. 5 years ago, it would have been crazy.
Yes. A lot of processing, a lot of psychological processing has gone on to get people to the point where they consider that to be normal. The whole culture's been flipped like this so much that the orientation has changed.
And how does that work? The thing is, I'm seeing these twinning pairs reading Girard in a rather different way now, because one of the things that we've been talking about generally for the last several years is how the crowd did that, right? How could the entire population flip from what considering one thing normal to considering a completely different thing normal. How could I mean, I've got up on my Facebook, it's been getting a lot of likes, a picture of Kermit looking out the window in the rain and saying, wondering whether all those people that unfriended me in 2020, 2021, and 2022 are going to come back and say they're sorry for the things that they said to us when we were saying, look, guys, no, there's nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
How are you so afraid? How did you get to this point where the mass formation took over? Ooh.
Yeah, how everyone entered the trip, the trip that was COVID-19. The Australian newspaper released something today. One of the state premiers that was famous for being very lockdown happy was trying to suppress a freedom of information request that finally got out, and the premier of the state was paying a full-time propaganda machine essentially to spy on the the residents of the state to see what their opinions were throughout the worst of the lockdowns. So there's money that gets poured into it, but it's the mood of the crowd that needs to be managed more than anything. So they put a lot of money into managing the mood of everybody and measuring it and making sure that the messages were there to keep everyone in the right mood, which it was, in that situation, sheer panic. And how they did it. They kept moving the goalposts for, identifying enemy and
friend, enemy,
the people that
enemy, friend.
Yeah, the people that were responsible for continuing the situation. It kept changing. And it changed too quickly for everybody to be able to keep up with it.
Well, so it's interesting that I'll go back a little bit. That we started with were these ads that I saw back in 2006. It's like a long time ago, and there is, it's like they were set up to be cognitively dissonant, right? That I think these are, we've got some more, keep with us, right? That are going to be more triggering for you probably, but they were designed to trigger you somewhat to say, no, I like that holiday. If you label the cruise ship hell, that doesn't make sense to me. If you label the camping holiday, that doesn't make sense to me. That they're meant to be shattering these pairs that are labeled opposite like that, right? So the meme version of it, normal people, conspiracy theorists, obviously it's meant to be funny and work because the labels are flipped from what they're meaning, right? That the conspiracy theorists are in fact behaving like normal people because they're just carrying on with their celebrations, and the conspiracy theorists are the ones labeled normal people. So that the joke here, but also the joke and the ad are both meant to startle and make you go through that little moment of horror of, wait, which one? Which is
the category
crisis. Yeah. So that we've been living in this, got a meme here. My mom says you're being indoctrinated. And there's two girls and one's holding a book with a cross on it. So Bible. And she's listening to the other one who's dressed in her Disney princess outfit and her makeup, right? And they're kids. So the one with the makeup on is obviously a bit young to be wearing that degree of makeup. And my mom says you're being indoctrinated is like, okay, fine, which one is, right?
Yes.
That both of them look at each other and think they're being indoctrinated, but we know the artist for this one, made by Jim Bob, is obviously going with the Christian is the one not being indoctrinated. But the problem of that, how do we say this, cognitive dissonance of mirroring, constantly ramping up so that we no longer can tell which side is the truth.
Mm. Well, there's the category crisis, which induces panic. And if this was the chaos mechanism of the COVID public health policies. Even if the people that were implementing them weren't conscious that they were creating chaos, that's what they were doing, because it was, masks are ineffective. Oh wait, no, now they're really effective. Oh wait, now you need to triple mask. So there's constantly inducing this category crisis. People don't actually know which is which when they're being flipped back and forth like this. And then in the sense of the advertisements that you've shown and the cartoon made by Jim Bob, it sort of whittles away the consensus of the group and starts to sift based on something, I don't know, kind of primal in people that polarizes them into an either or. They kind of get they get put into opposing camps, maskers versus anti-maskers. It becomes that very, very quickly when people were being told, that they needed to use them, then not use them, then use them again. Right. It's this odd shifting sort of effect on everybody.
So the way you're describing it is what I think we've typically been telling ourselves, that they're doing this it induces the cognitive dissonance. And yes, we did an episode back in the autumn talking about the gaslighting and saying, it's like this perpetual instability and crisis leaves us. There's sort of hypnotic effect, yes, and also a problem of you become dependent on the next statement because your own sense of judgment is so shattered.
Yeah, you can't make predictive models in this kind of environment because if it's constant cognitive dissonance, you can't predict with any accuracy what's happening for yourself personally or the people around you.
Right.
So instead of assuming that, in the simpler example, instead of assuming, yeah, everyone wants to take a cruise, do they really now? You can't make that assumption anymore. It's the destruction of your ability to make a predictive model on what's going on. And then because of that, you're completely destabilized and then really, really open to suggestion from the outside based on momentary emotional responses. And then you've got, in the Jim Bob cartoon, you've got people that are seeing these two children in completely different situations. This wouldn't have been possible until everybody had the ability to make a predictive social model eliminated. If you ask most people 20 years ago, where is the indoctrination? It would have been very obvious. This elimination of clear categories happens through this constant flip.
Okay, so
people have lost an ability.
I'm not doing this deviously, but I'm sort of leading you down a garden path. I've set you up to understand this.
Sorry, she's the puppet master.
I am. What's interesting is you're describing it. It's like you can't tell the difference between the two of them. Yes. That you're saying that, and what we've been talking about, and I think until I started reading Girard, this is where I I was also looking that it's frustrating not being able to tell the difference between, obviously in the cartoon, both of the children are being indoctrinated. I mean, the one holding the Bible is being indoctrinated. She's being given doctrine by the church,
Yes.
right? So indoctrinated
Yes.
is exactly the right word. But obviously the Disney princess girl is too. So they're both being indoctrinated. The joke works because they're in fact both very similar.
Yes.
And what you were just saying is like we're in crisis because you can't tell them apart. But this is what I've really only figured this out or understood it in the last few days, that it's necessary that they in fact be very, very similar. So with going back to the conspiracy theorists and the normal people, I mean, we felt this a lot over the last few years. It's like you'd be walking around without a mask, knowing that everybody looking at you thinks you're a conspiracy theorist, but looking at them with the masks, if you're on the not mask side, and going, you guys have bought into the conspiracy. But they're looking at you and thinking, oh, you're a so these twinnings work in the ads and in these cartoons precisely because both labels work on the labels both work both directions.
Yes. They can be interchangeable. They're similar enough that you can put the same labels on each of them.
They have to be interchangeable. Yeah. That's what I finally see with Girard. And then everything went. I'm starting to. Okay, so because when I first saw all of the ads, I started recognizing. So back in 2006, I started recognizing how often this kind of pairing twinning comes up. I've used the sort of idea a lot in my teaching over the last however long, nearly 20 years, showing things like the tension between history and myth. How can you tell the difference between what's historical if you're looking for King Arthur, right? Because King Arthur is basically mythological, but we have, people looking for the historical King Arthur because even though it's very, very clear in the historical record that he's made up as a character, we still believe it's like this history myth, and my alt history class that I just finished teaching, I was trying to help the students see how often that kind of flip happens, that the things that we want to prove are historically real, we let's say always, but we want to prove them historically real because they have mythological power for us. That we go into the study of history to find the truth about the things that we actually only truly believe in because they have this mythological grip on us. So the Disney and the indoctrinated, it's like which is it? Which indoctrination is it? Is it the Disney stories of princesses, the fairy tales that you're wanting to inhabit and embody that are most real to you? Or is it the gospel story that we know, because of the way we date our society, Anno Domini, is actually historically real? And so both the girls they're both being taken into a story that is simultaneously historical and mythological.
Yeah, so it's pointing to the myth history, the establishment of somebody's myth history, their mythological history.
Right.
That is the center of your identity, essentially.
Well, the good, bad, good thing started helping me see that. And then I used it. I was looking through my slides from my classes and thinking, okay, I've seen this several times. So, for example, I did a class with a colleague in Japanese history, and we did knights and samurai. This is about 2007. So I think that was the first time I started seeing it in the twinning problem, right? And, but okay, knights and samurai, they're both like warriors, right? Yes. One from one end of Eurasia and one from the other end of Eurasia. And, if you go England, Japan, it's kind of island countries on the opposite end of the great landmass. And in both historiographies, it's very interesting. you could look at the knights and you say everything we know about them is basically mythological, made up chivalry, right? You know, Knights of the Round Table, Arthurian quests and romances and stuff. There's a similar sort of problem with the samurai, that there's lots of stories about the samurai that are similarly sort of mythological and you know, legendary and things like that. And so when you look at the history of both of these, the actual behavior of the men of the day, the knights are brutal thugs and the samurai are brutal thugs. But they also both carry these kind of myths of chivalry and you know, spiritual training, and you know, one's Christian, one's Zen, and yet they all have, every guy who's, you know, ever played any video games or taken martial arts training knows the feeling of wanting to inhabit that sense of dignity and manliness and, you know, strength and martial prowess that goes not with the reality of these men killed human beings with swords fairly, well, actually not unrepentantly. I mean, there are problems on both sides, but that the mythology of what you want, why you would have a room of, we had under 100 people in that class, maybe, I mean, I can't remember how many, you know, lots of guys wanting to learn about knights and samurai. They did not want to be killers. What they wanted was that feeling of
masculine nobility,
right? But the funny thing is that many of the, you know, it's like if you've read a lot of samurai manga, like, I don't know, Lone Wolf and Cub, you're going to have a very sort of mythological vision of the samurai and think, oh, you know, isn't it too bad that in the West we don't have trained monks as warriors? It's like, wait a minute. Arthurian romances. And the images that we get from the samurai culture of Bushido as chivalric, oh, guess what? Were developed in the 19th century by guys who were in England, from Japan, studying and recognizing the chivalry was this ideal of the Victorian period. And so took it back to, it like crosses constantly. So the history, myth history stuff, disentangling whether, you know, but the problem is people live according to that myth. So to say the history is only mythological or the myth doesn't affect history, it doesn't get disentangled. It all twins up every time you start looking at it.
Yeah, because people, so what I'm getting from what you've described is that human beings cannot live independent of mythology. So regardless of whether or not something is historical, they're always going to weave a mythology into their narrative, which means that you only get myth history and never straight history.
Right.
Or straight mythology. It's always going to be yoked together.
They're so I keep talking about twinning, right? They're mutually driving.
Yes.
They're mutually driving. And then Girard is very interesting because he's trying to understand the structure of myth. And I think also he's a literature professor or literature scholar primarily, but how myth breaks into history, which I've been very interested in with my study of Tolkien, because he was also interested in that. You know, at what point does history become real? Well, it's sort of this problem of it's more real the more plain and mythological it becomes. So these don't, but anyway, the primary problem being that there's a sort of figure ground problem. You can't see the myth without the history and the history without the myth in those terms. But that this sort of, I'm going to show the next picture and then everybody will get mad at me. Okay. There we go. Comedian, grifter, grifter, comedian. Tell me which is which.
Oh.
Hi, everyone.
I can't personally, can I?
No, because you shouldn't be able to, right? It's like, so Owen training himself by having tomatoes thrown at him to be a comedian was obviously running a fair, you know, he's at the Renaissance fair grifting off of people's frustration with the insults that he's hurling at them, so they throw tomatoes at him. Jim
Party
Bob,
life.
Jim Bob, obviously, I mean, in this one, it's interesting. Can anyone point me towards my opinion, which I found hilariously appropriate, right? Because Owen, as the guy who has tomatoes thrown at him, is saying things that enrage people enough to get them to throw tomatoes. That's his whole point.
Yes.
And then Jim Bob, even in his own cartoon, there saying, what opinion should I have? The joke being, of course, everybody's trying to tell all of us what, like we were talking about with the advertisements and the propaganda and the health messaging and stuff. What should I believe? And in his doing that as a cartoonist and, you know, selling his products and images on you know, it's very easy to put stuff on products if you sign up with Zazzle. we have merch for sale at Draco. We have merch for sale at dragoncommonroom.com, which you should check out because we have puzzles and a lamp and paperweight. Here we got this. I hear my grifting moment of the lovely dove paperweight, right? I'm holding a globe of light, right? That's filled with the dove. It's like we do this. We are both, you know, performing and hoping to profit from it.
Yes.
And of course, the discussion that has spiraled up in the UATV community and elsewhere over the last month or so has been in the I'm a comedian, he's a grifter. He's a grifter, I'm a comedian. And it's like this twinning of, I got this dragon image one that works with the poem, my dragon song poem that I co-wrote with Cheryl. But it's also like in Merlin's prophecies and Jeffrey Monmouth's completely not historical story about King Arthur, you get these like red, white twinning of intensities and energies, which is appropriate since the reception I went to tonight at the consulate was for whales. So we're thinking about dragons, right? But the kind of spiraling energies that come when you get two characters that are basically identical. Just different.
Sorry, my brain went into like 4 different directions. I saw the yin and yang. I'm seeing a maypole dance.
Yes, finally.
I'm seeing this really odd. There was this really strange book I bought when I was younger. Some guy talking about some asteroid thing. Anyway, it was the origin of the letter 8, the figure 8, because apparently there was a star formation that was going in this weird kind of spin out. Too many thoughts at once. There was this film, I don't know if you've ever seen it. It was a Jet Li movie, like Kung Fu, and it was called The One. So it's about all these parallel universes. There's a million universes, and then it's the same character, but in all of these different parallel universes. One of them is a very dangerous criminal, figures out how to jump into the other universes and starts killing himself, because the more you kill, the more power you're getting, because all of your other multiverse versions are all dead. Anyway, there ends up being just 2 left. So that's what you've described. This impossible to tell the 2 of them apart, because of course they sound the same. One's good, one's evil. It's very difficult to tell which one is which.
Exactly. And this is where I finally started to understand. So Matthias Dismet, the Belgian psychologist, I forget what his academic field is, right? But he's been writing, he's been talking about the mass formation stuff and totalitarianism and things like that. And the thing that I could not get from his description of the mass formations is why, right? What is actually the mechanism for how the mass ends up believing these things about the danger, where the danger is, right? And he, you know, sort of talking generic. He talks generically about the way the gaslighting works and the triggers and things like that, and could say that back in those 2006 ads with the cake and the broccoli, or the hell and heaven vacation stuff, they're the seed of this. And I started seeing it with the history myth history, and then back in 2012, when I was finally reading about Obama, why he wasn't the person that I thought he was in 2008, and I'm starting to have to break out of whatever one version of the siding. It's like, you guys, you're not going to be able to take sides by the time we finish this this episode. That Obama was standing for everything good that Bush had not been, right? And then I started reading about Obama and some of the conservative literature, and I'm like, okay, no, he's not good. He's not the good guy. And there's Romney running against him, and I'm doing these blog posts talking about, your guy, our guy, our guy, your guy, and realizing that the same sort of now I would say the same sort of twinning kept happening, right? It's like
Coke versus Pepsi.
Coke versus Pepsi. That you see, you look at Obama, and if you're on our side, you see him as the embodiment of all good things, and if you're on the other side, you see him as the griftery bad guy, and vice versa. I can't see. I mean, Obama and Romney look identical to me now, because eventually I started seeing that. I mean, more recently. Okay, so we have Owen and Jim Bob twinning each other and spiraling up in this kind of dragon dance, right? But we've also been reminded, because of all the tapes that Tucker Carlson has started to talk about, of the twinning of what was going on January 6th. And this one, I put up, it's Nancy Pelosi and Jacob Chansley, Q Shaman, Pelosi in one of her signature pantsuits with a very ritual decorative mask on, right? I'm still fascinated by this mask that she wore. It's so amazingly ornamented with embroidery and such. It's like this was not a medical mask, right? This was a ritual mask.
Theatrical.
It's very theatrical, very, very, and we know that they're wearing them theatrically, but this one actually worked. And Chansley is there with his face paint on, and his, he's holding a flag, and he's got his buffalo hat, and he's got, I assume they're tattoos, whether they're painted on, or I guess they're tattoos. They seem fairly stable. That, patriot, traitor, traitor, patriot. I was very taken by the words patriot, traitor, because they're like nearly anagrams. There's no P in traitor, but they were like, you can see the words themselves doing this twinning. And anybody looking at Pelosi, who was standing up for, the proper functioning of our government and the recognition of the true elections, she's the patriot. And there's the Q Shaman and his costume, ruffianness, barbarian at the gates, taking, well, we've seen him now on the videos walking calmly through and I did blog posts on this, how
the most relaxed barbarian in the history.
Yeah,
Barbarism.
Dude. And the thing is, I did a long blog post on when he's in the chamber, and he walks in, he goes, "Hey," right? He's such a dude. And there's an officer following him, and he prays and everything. So no, he's the patriot, and she's the traitor, because those of us on, once the other side of the conversation say, no, there was definitely shenanigans around something, and she's participating in covering it up. Patriot, traitor, traitor, patriot. And I did this blog post with this picture when I'd been listening to Owen talking about batteries. And so this one was called Battery Life, how the two poles, good, bad, positive, negative, are necessary to kind of drive the whole engine.
Yes. Yeah, the polarity is needed.
Right.
Positive and negative, or it doesn't work. So, we can't predict. You can't predict the category, because people are going to look. I'm just thinking in terms of like how to think about these kind of iconic twins, the twinning effect. You can't predict who is going to be who because they look so similar. They have to look similar in order to be twinning. You can't predict, and they do flip. So they don't necessarily stay the same. Would that be correct?
That's now we're getting to an accurate description of the phenomenon. That when I was listening to Owen talk about the batteries, and I'm like, I think that, so then we put it in the McLuhan media moment, and I'm like, okay, this is clearly electrical, right? It's a positive, and it's like it's driving it, positive and negative, just as the poles of the magnet or the battery or whatever. So not necessarily good and bad, but just the poles driving the dynamo, or however Hans, everyone knows, because I admitted it, I failed electromagnetism in physics lab, that that you create an electric magnet and spins the dynamo, and positive and negative. It's like, it's the alternating current thing, I think. My metaphors are breaking down, but that somehow that my until Girard, my thinking was that was what it was. It's a kind of energy spiral. So in fact, you need both of them, right? And if you find one, there's going to be the opposite somewhere, right? And then recognizing that obviously our elections run this way, with the Republicans, Democrats, whatever, parliamentary, they always end up in the parliamentary system, two sides, they drive each other. You're not going to have a one party. Yes. I mean, it's a uniparty, but it's a uniparty of this polarizing. So they look identical, but they're polarized.
Yeah, I'm thinking that's it explains why the category left and right becomes meaningless, because they're interchangeable now. They seem to be interchangeable if you speak to people on the left, the right. You can't, the old category labels are not applicable, because they've started to merge to become so similar that it's very difficult to tell them apart one from the other. It becomes a question of indoctrination, like the Jim Bob cartoon, more than it does actual differences.
So that's what we've been thinking, right? And they say it's like the Orwell, the Animal Farm, when the pigs become fat people, right? And you say the capitalists and communists are actually the same. And we're constantly having this feeling in the conspiracy theorist world. Recognize there's only one system, right? That there isn't, that's why all of the people in Congress end up dressing identically. It's like they change the different ties, if they're color ties, if they're men, or that I couldn't tell the difference. I can't, by now I can't tell the difference between MTG and AOC. They're obviously poles of the same battery, and AOC almost called out the requirement that there's an MTG, because you need the two of them. One by itself won't run, whereas both of them together give the energy that. So I'm going to unpack this even more, but we get, this is where I'd gotten to until recently, right? That recognizing these as batteries, so that we go to now.
They're charged by the tension of contrast.
Right, but they're almost identical, which is really tricky. So much so that next we have George III in his coronation outfit and the Constitution. Conservative, liberal, liberal, conservative. Which one is which? I mean, in the American political scene, we've been having this, sort of like, there's no rhinos. They're all, Republican in name only. The conservatives, they don't even conserve what they think they can. Well, probably because they're another of these dyads, right? Is the monarch conservative of tradition, and the Constitution is liberal in its Enlightenment philosophy, or is in fact the king liberal because he's actually the guarantor of liberty? And I mean, what's ironic is George III is just Enlightenment as the Constitution, right? They're another, and the Constitution is now the conservative, so that those of us on the right, you're gonna see it doesn't work that way. Think that what we want to do is conserve the institutions as they were originally described in the Constitution, but you might be better off with the liberalizing ability of the king. Although George III, insofar as he's a mercantilist, free trade, Adam Smithian, whatever he was, right? It's another dyad.
Yeah, it's choose your version of Globo Homo.
In this one, yeah, because George III is the British Empire, and the Constitution is now, the American Empire. Um,
Yes.
uh, it
Anglos and Americans.
right. But what I was also thinking when I put these together, I put some of these pairs I put together for my class and then I relabeled them for us. This one I had just good, bad, bad, good. It's like the king's good, the constitution's bad. No, the king's bad, the constitution's good. But that the king as a human being in whom you can actually invest, authority and responsibility is a stronger good than the document that you use. It's a document's just a piece of paper. It has no power whatsoever, except for the agreement that everyone has to abide by it. And this twinning of king and document is a feature of English history, right? That here's the king, and we're going to write a document about whatever it is to make it real. But it's only the human beings that can make the document real. So which one is the actual authority?
The problem of vivifying a covenant, isn't it?
Yes, we have Casey gave us a super chat. Thank you. Magna Carta, Constitution, Constitution, Magna Carta. So maybe, although those are both documents, so they're almost, the Magna Carta is binding the king. And the Constitution is the people declaring themselves the constitutors. I'm not sure that Magna Carta Constitution doesn't work the same way King Constitution does in the twinning problem. I'll have to think about Magna Carta Constitution.
Yeah, because it's an argument over who's sovereign. Who is the sovereign?
With the king and the Constitution. The king is sovereign, or the people are sovereign. But what's interesting with the king, he's only king insofar as the people recognize him as such. And the Constitution is interesting because it's like we the people create this nation, but we're finding out what happens when you don't have that that human being in whom the responsibility lands. Then right.
Yeah, well, we have this argument here because we're not republic, thankfully. I'm not a Republican, and so we have this strange relationship to our monarchy because it's sort of not our monarchy. So Australia is kind of a pseudo monarchy. So we have a problem with this twinning because we're not fully sovereign, not fully under the sovereign, which is the king. Yet we're not fully our own republic under a constitution. So we're in this strange grey area down under. But the argument here is always around the word sovereignty. It's a very triggering word for Australia right now. Sovereignty, especially with the native question, because our Indigenous people weren't included on the constitution that the British created. So they're arguing over sovereignty. So yeah, this is a good one. in terms of the Australian twinning, this would be the big one, sovereign. And it's very triggering for everybody here right now. There's a lot of unease around it.
So what we're trying to unpack is okay, there's the twinning, and then Girard actually has an explanation for why this happens, this driving out of it. There's recognizing the twins. What are actually the pairs that are generating the, and it's not there's energy, but it's also destruction potentially out of these pairs. I mean, so obviously the Constitution was after the United States kicked George out. The Patriot Trader, it's like there's potential for violence in all of these. Yeah. Casey points out there's a copy of the Magna Carta in the Library of Congress, interestingly enough. Yeah. So I'm going to say that,
forgive me. I need to check something.
Homework is find more twins because they're everywhere.
I've got one, and I think I just have to check because it was St. Paul on the boat called Castor and Pollux.
Oh,
But it
yeah.
had, you know that one?
No, good. But the actual twins, Castor and Pollux, right?
So Castor and Pollux, the constellations, but they're the twins. They're Gemini. Now let me see it. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it was. It was Paul sailing under the sign of Castor and Pollux. So St. Paul, I remember that. Now there was a shipwreck. That's why when he said the potential for violence, I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that happened to St. Paul. Luke writes, after 3 months, we sailed in an Alexandrian ship, as Egypt, whose figurehead was the twin brothers, which had wintered at the island. Anyway, there you go. So
okay,
the twinning effect has been there since forever.
Cain and Abel. Anyway, carrying on. No, and so what Girard is going to say is you're going to start realizing how many stories have these twins. These, I mean, in some think they're actually simply twins, brothers, right? But I think, or well, actually, they're usually brothers. Are they? They can be female twins too. And I'm in the Scapegoat I'm reading. He's talking about the beheading of John the Baptist and how Herod and Herodias are twinned. And then Herodias and her daughter are twinned. That what Girard tried to figure out was like, okay, so why does this constant mirroring and intensity happen? Let's carry on.
Esther and Vashti.
Now we have empire, nation, nation, empire. Class, can you recognize what these images are?
Is this what I think it is?
Well, this one. So one of them has it's you realize I picked my juxtapositions very carefully so that they work visually too. One's a long reflecting pool with a monument at the top and a sort of circular in place monument at the bottom. The other is got a big red banner and a star with a hammer and sickle on it, and at the bottom of the picture, tanks. So one's DC and
violence arrives.
One's DC and one's Moscow. And what I was trying to twin here was these are both ways of celebrating the victory in World War II. The monument in Washington is the monument to the World War, and I forget exactly what it's called, but it's a circular thing with all 50 states, and then a pool in the center, so that there's monuments for each state, and this is showing the United States as the victor in World War II. And then the one in Moscow is a parade they had last summer in May. With tanks and the sort of celebration of the Soviet victory over the Nazis. So these are the two victors over the Nazis. But which is which counts itself? And then I was trying to label this one, the good bad good bad bad good, and it's like, is empire good? I'm not sure. Usually in my twinnings, the good is the starter, but the United States obviously is an empire, and Russia is now behaving like a nation because its empire broke up, right? So Russia, insofar as it is Russia, is a nation, but this is last summer, so they're showing off their military equipment in what some from our side of the story would say looks like an imperial expansion into the Ukraine, which they would say no, it's an extension of the nation. The United States likes to think of itself as the nation, right? We've got our nation of citizenship and civic nationalism and such. We're not an empire, right? We're simply a nation. Whereas no, the Russians, they're the ones with the empire, because there was such a thing as the Russian Empire, right? Before it broke up in World War.
Yes.
But the point being, it's like these are literally, they both beat the Nazis. So it's interesting that they then end up in the twinning violence of the Cold War and now the present war. Of NATO versus Russia, whatever that means. These should start looking more, I mean, maybe comedian, grifter, comedian, oh, those, no, they're totally different. Jim Bob did this, Owen did that. No, it's different. It's completely different. It's his fault. It's his fault. Excuse me. To be able to feel the energy that's generated by these pairings, that's the first step.
So they have there's, well, in the case of the Russians and America, it's a shared enemy that then creates this rivalry between the two of them. Then they splinter into a Cold War. Previously, they had the same point of focus. They had the same enemy. They've lost their point of focus. They lose their shared enemy. So then they turn on each other.
Did they lose their shared enemy?
Well, no. Not mythologically.
The Soviets and now the
Going
Russians
back to mythology and
hate
history.
the Nazis just as much as the Americans do. So they're in fact, I mean, this is what's interesting about this pairing. Now I realize it's like the Cold War. You could see it as the rivalry that happens over what they both get the atomic bomb, but the original pairing is because they were, they were both defeating the Nazis, and they both hated the Nazis intensely. Interesting for the Americans, hating the Nazis was a continuation of World War I. Oh, look, friend, enemy, enemy, friend. I love when I've got my slides in the right order. We have Ein Vaterland in Gefahr, something like that. It's like, no, Sein Vaterland is in danger, right? Volunteer. These are World War I. Over the top for you. Buy U.S. government bonds. Third Liberty loans. I think they're World War I. Which one did I find these? Well, anyways, Germans and Americans, right? And one of the things that we've obviously been starting to become much more aware of is how the generation of war relies on these completely paired, twinned oppositional forces, right? The German recruiting poster and the American recruiting poster, and these I chose because they were both showing, manly soldiers defending their country, right? Defend the fatherland, defend the flag. And you as American look at the German one and say enemy, and you as the German look at the American one and say enemy. But like the football game or the rugby game or the soccer game, whatever it was at that Christmas truce, right? They're identical. They're young men thrown into this rivalry.
Oh yeah, the soccer game,
right? Over. Well, what, right? And it after the moment of the cognitive dissonance and the twinning and the escalation evaporates, nobody can remember. Are we even going to be able to remember why people started wearing those masks? I bet some people don't even think about it anymore. It's like, why are you wearing a mask? Oh, I just do. There's this these escalations happen. The Jim Bob Owen debate, nobody knows what started it now. It's going to keep going of itself. The Russian American one, the German English one.
It becomes a perpetual motion machine culturally. Okay, so this is interesting because we have two empires, or an empire nation, or a nation and empire, depending on your perspective. Yeah, it gets confusing. So we've got the point of view nation empire, point of view empire nation, and then the shared hate muse of Nazi Germany, which keeps this relationship moving, keeps it cohesive. So this would explain it, because there's no rationality there. Therefore, people can run this mechanism with the amnesia of understanding the beginning of it, because it's not a rational mechanism, it's an emotional mechanism.
It's very much an emotional mechanism. And you called it a hate muse.
Nazis.
Yeah, I've gone back to Empire Nation Empire. That hate muse, very, very powerful.
Yeah.
They hate Hitler.
So Germany
mutually.
Yeah. It's the hate. Yeah. So that in this particular example, Germany is the hate muse of the Soviets and the Americans.
Right. Well, I think particularly the Nazis. So I mean, the Russians are in Ukraine now, saying they're fighting Nazis. The Americans are in whatever we're doing exactly through NATO, fighting the Russians so they don't become Hitler-like, right? It's like the hate muse, this negative desired object, is the same for both of them, which everybody's been very, very confused about, right? It's like, wait, are we fighting Nazis? Wait, we're all fighting Nazis,
yes,
because the Nazis drive this particular twinning.
Yeah, that makes sense. It makes sense because the Third World were not involved. The Third World became the Third World because they were non-aligned with both Soviet and America, the Soviet side and the American side. And for the most part, from my memory, the Third World or the non-aligned nations had nothing to do with that particular conflict. So they have their own hate muses that drive their own particular twinning.
Well, if you think about all of the places where the hate muses are working, usually the two sides from the outside look identical. And it's almost impossible for outside. It's like the wait, which one do I got? The Iranian Civil War. There was the Civil War there, right? Or Iran versus Iraq, right? To the outside, I mean, they think they're. I mean, and this will be saying, it's like everybody will end up with, oh yeah, Catholics and Protestants, that Sunni and Shia. Oh well, they're all Muslims, aren't they? Why do they fight? Right. So the closer they are, the more vicious it gets. And what Mel is saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, that's not quite what this is. This is something else. The hate muse has two faces. So we're giving you enough examples now that we're getting into the like why I was going wow, because I realized, of course, if I don't go take you all through the journey that I went on to get to my understanding, nobody gets there, right?
You stepped through the looking glass.
I just went step through. Come on, cool guys, it's mimetic rivalry. Okay, you still don't know what that is yet. All right, so we've got the friend, enemy, and new friend, and recognizing that certainly World War I is incomprehensible to most people to look at it now, because why would they fight? The Germans and the English were nearly identical in the First World War. The French, right? They all look like, classically educated Christian young men fighting, courageously against what? Right? It's like, what were they fighting against? Sauron. Okay. Let's go to the next one. Rational, superstitious, rational. We get deep. Which one was the image? Cotton Mather, who was the president of Harvard, and one of the two Mathers who was most responsible for the driving of the Salem witch trials.
Oh, okay.
And the other is now I've forgotten her name and I should look it up. One of the Native American women who was accused of being a witch, and I had one of my students in my alt history classes doing her paper on this particular twinning, and you can start with, oh well, obviously it was rational to be worried about witches back in the 17th century because they were disrupting the community, and there's also rational reason to be worried about Indian attacks in 17th century Salem. And there we have, I got to look her up. I forgot what her name is. Tatuga or something like that. I'm sorry, I don't remember her name properly. And she has, various associations with, I think I'm gonna have to look her up. Carry on while I do my research that I should have done.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about this. So all of these pairs are identical, even though they might look slightly differently aesthetically. They're essentially the same. You've just described high-tech American and a Native American.
Mm-hmm.
As a twin pair. I'm thinking that this effect, it transcends technological differences. This twinning effect can translate technological differences.
So I looked at, she's an enslaved South American Indian from the West Indies. Accused of attracting the girls, but so she's enslaved, but she's from South America. Tatuba. I was close. Okay, carry on. So I mean, the thing is, Mather and Tatuba are completely twinned in this, because by now the modern scholarship has seen her as, an empowered woman of indigenous craft, and him as completely superstitious idiot Puritan. So they flipped completely over the course of the scholarship. And now most people use the Salem witch trials as the example of hysteria. But it's Mather, the one who is the superstitious one, not Tatuba or her, medicinal practices.
So what was their hate muse?
Well, see, then this is when it's like the Nazis is easy, because there's this hate muse, and it's still to a certain extent present to us as the hate character, right? Throw everything on Hitler easily. You know how to recognize your enemy because he's like Hitler, but everybody's enemy is like Hitler, so that just makes our twinning more powerful. In the rational superstitious, then what they're starting to recognize, there has to be something that they're both focused on that starts the driving. And it's the mystery in the twinning and the escalation is what that object was.
So in order for I'm trying to solidify the visual here. So we have two different elements which are orientated towards the same central body, and then they move into orbit around that in opposition to one another. And as they're moving around this object, this devotional object, or in this case something that they both hate, they become more and more alike until you can't tell one from another.
Right. So let's go. Let's go back. Let's go back and start over with our examples. So we got Owen and Jim Bob.
Tomatoes, tomatoes.
See, there we go.
Sorry, I had to do it. But that's what it is, isn't it?
Yes, yes, basically.
The effect.
Okay. Yeah. So the effect. Now that we've explored enough of these, and it's like we've got a big one to wrestle with by the end at the end of this series, right? We'll say that what Girard saw in myths that he studied, and this is the origin of the relationship between the violence and the sacred, is that all human desire is in fact mimetic, he says. That what we did, and this I'm taking more from what I heard in his lectures rather than what I've read in the book so far, but that we don't want things of ourselves simply. This is also explaining advertising. We want things that we see other people desiring. Okay, so the first step in this structure, this dynamic structure that he's seen, is saying, recognizing the power of mimetic desire, wanting what someone else wants, so we imitate what the other person wants, which is then interesting. It's like, when is there ever a beginning desire? Well, he does talk about, in the lectures, he talks about the Adam and Eve and the fall, the tomatoes. That the snake tells her it's good, right? So she's seen what the snake desires. So then Satan has to come in there. I'm not sure where Satan's going to get in there. I haven't studied Girard enough yet, but the snake shows her what she wants, what she's to desire, and then she desires it, and then gives it to Adam, who desires it because she's desiring it. There's the initial twinning is you have the same object of wanting. So then having to looking at these pairs to see what's the thing that they're both desiring, which will then and this, all the light bulbs went off when I heard Girard explain this, that you start as brothers because you share that focus. You become rivals because you share that focus.
It's Jacob and Esau.
Yep. And it to Casey was actually saying that that it's also heartbreaking to think about it that way. It's like you become rivals because you actually wanted the same thing, and then you destroy each other.
Yeah, it's a tragedy.
There we go. Human history. There's more. He went further than that, but that was his first step, recognizing that we end up in rivalries because, and there was a very sort of plain way he said it, and I started thinking about, oh wow. So, for example, you have two mathematicians who say are in graduate school, and both of them love studying math, but then there's only one position of professor, and then they become hated rivals. And then I started going back through my history and going, oh, moments when I, had been you're like in graduate school is a hard one, right? Because you're all there. It's a moment when it's the last moment as an academic that you ever get to feel camaraderie, right? I'm sorry, it's true. Because you all go and you're in graduate school and you all love the same topic and you get to be friends together because you're all loving the same topic. And then the rivalry kicks in, and it's incredibly difficult because you want the same thing and there's only one of it, right? That particular teaching position or that particular accolade, or it's like the actual desire and love for the same thing. I mean, it also, it feels like all romantic triangles, right? The two men love the same woman. And at first they're friends because they honor. You can see it out there on the internet constantly, right? We're all going to be fans. Oh no, I'm the best fan. Never more bitter than that moment. You become rivals over the love that you have for the beloved.
I'm just thinking this is the entire history of the Israelites.
Oh yes.
the more you're saying it, like, yeah, there's that and then that and then that, and yeah, it's just the constant effect of twinning around a shared desire, which produces a rivalry that ends up in some catastrophic implosion somehow. It makes perfect sense.
So then I started, we're going backwards now, right? Going back to what drove the COVID stuff, right? I'm trying to find, there's got to be, so the mimesis was clear, right? The imitation. Everybody
Yes.
started imitating each other, and that's what Matthias Desmet was describing. This mass formation. It's like what you need, the driver there is you need the way people imitate each other, and it's
Mm.
more than just we don't like feeling left out of the group. I mean, we don't, but there's also, people will be, one person will do something and then the whole group does it, and you're basically just imitating each other. Fashion works that way, right? The fads, it's
Yes.
just and it's a kind of contagion of, stupid hairstyles for goodness sake, or ridiculous clothes. Or I'm actually quite sympathetic to all the people that color their hair different colors now, because I think they just want to be, they want to imitate the colors that they're constantly looking at in our video devices, in our rainbows.
Yes.
They're imitating the rainbows. It's pretty simple actually. But with the COVID stuff, there had to be something else to then drive it up. So I think the mimesis is the medic rivalry is part of it, but I'm not sure it solved everything. And and the thing is, Girard sort of did this too. He sort of, okay, I've got this piece, and then he starts saying, well, wait, okay, then how that, right? And he kept adding on elements to his structure to say, okay, this goes with that. It's like he's discovering the whole mechanism, and then you keep testing it. We should keep testing it. It's like we should, oh yeah, he's got the solution, and that solves that. It's a dynamic exploration of why are these elements there. Okay, now I see this, I didn't see that before. And in a revelation, right, there's this regular sense of, oh, that's why that's there. Okay, now what did we put this piece in? So the mimesis is first, the imitation, and then the rivalry that spins up from that.
So people are being memed into rivalry, in the sense that to imitate something is to follow the meme of that particular object.
I think some of the memes are pointing to the fact of that imitation and trying to, but the other thing Girard started to realize is the thing that drives the rivalry is usually hidden. It's not something that you're necessarily conscious of as it's happening, which is why wars can carry on, right? It's like if we realized what we were fighting over was that, and it's also why I think I'm playing on this myself. One, why the two sides, that he's in the rivalry, the two sides will become more and more alike because they're looking for the same, they're focused on the same object of desire. So they actually want the same thing, which is why they end up looking like both themselves and their reaction to the desire. I'm back to Owen and Jim Bob.
Yeah. So, okay. So, the way you're describing this, it's kind of transformation of I'm going to try and explain this. It's a transformation of a group of people who start to take on the identity of a totem that represents that group. So this is the Polynesian tattooing. So we have like a particular tribe that has a particular set of markings, or they'll have a tribal totem, and then because they're all thinking about this particular totem that represents the ideal, that's the thing that everybody's desiring to take on the traits of this particular totem. They all mark their bodies in this particular way until everyone in the tribe has the same markings. And then because everyone starts to look similar, they have to find some way of differentiating themselves. The rivalry is in who can embody it the best out of all of those people that are beginning to look so similar because they're all staring at that same totem. This is kind of the way that I'm seeing it work, in that very basic way.
You've hit it exactly. That's exactly what Girard figured out. Very good.
Tribes.
Well, but
yeah, I get that.
The actual rivalries come from sameness, not difference. And that we always tell things about, it's like, oh, they're fighting because they're so different. It's like, actually, no, they're fighting because they're so much alike. And as you just said, and they needed something to differentiate themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if you're, I mean, this is like the ancient way of manifesting it, because everyone had that shared aesthetic. So, and everybody's going back into it as well, with body modification. Everyone's having tattoos and piercing and everything. The visual, the aesthetics of the face, it's all becoming very tribal and very same.
So I think I'm missing some steps in my understanding of what Girard said. At some point, this becomes intolerable, and there's a crisis of, and this is what I'm wondering about the COVID stuff. It's like I could feel it coming, which was interesting, and some of it I kept telling myself, oh, it's like, it feels like it's going to be like the French Revolution, because there's going to be something like, this kind of explosion that will take 2 or 3 years, and then everybody will wake up and go, whoa, what did we just do? We're kind of in that moment right now, right? But what I knew it was coming. I didn't know why, and I'm still not sure I understand why. I did. It's like Owen's posting now about how he predicted it in 2020. I did too, guys. It's on the blog. I mean, some of it I wrote it down on the blog because I knew I needed to be able to say, look, I did see this back at the time, right? And I could feel it happening, what was going on. If what Girard is pointing to is things had gotten too same, right? There was a need for differentiation, and the crisis comes. Now the scapegoat comes when you need something to like pile all of this on. And what I don't understand yet right now is where the crisis comes from. I think I got 2 poles of the problem: the mimesis and the rivalry spin up, and then the scapegoat. And I think I'm missing the middle. That I think you can feel the crisis happening. Weirdly enough, to a certain extent, everything, it was becoming very much same, right? You and I have been talking about this. It's like all in the internet. We're all becoming exactly the same, and that creates this just intolerable need for differentiation.
Well, we've had 80 years of compulsory schooling in the West, and then that's an industrial schooling model which produces sameness for industry, because that's how it was developed. It was developed under the Prussian model, the Schule, which was a military blueprint transposed over the education for German factory excellence. I mean, so there's social engineering that we've all been dealing with in the background that we're not conscious of, because just like the masks, we've always done that. We've always sent our children to school to become just like everyone else's kids so they can fit into the same cubicle. So the sameness is there, right?
Yes.
So this makes sense to me now, because everyone's been behaving like Germans for 80 years in the Schule model, and then losing their microclimates, which would create little duchy cultures. So we've already been working with the kind of imperial model of doing things. And then we've lost the third world to turn to because the third world has started to industrialize. So now we don't even have that first world, second world, third world contrast. We're losing that as a kind of mechanism of polarity. Where, it's sort of blending, and then and everyone says, right, crisis, because everyone was getting too same. It makes perfect sense. The tribe needed to have a big contest of rivalry in order to decide who was different. Yeah.
This is why I love talking about this stuff with you. Yes, I think that's exactly it. Isn't that amazing?
It's so cool and also really terrifying.
Yes. And Okay, so the reason I got interested in the Q shaman was because Jonathan Pajot posted something in winter in like December 2020 saying things are going to get like weird, right? Enchanted, something like that. And then on January 6th, after the photographs of shaman came out, Pajot said, look, I said this was coming, right? And I'm like, oh, there it is. This is very interesting. And then I went and watched this video with Q shaman talking about, being in the sacred place of the capital, and knowing therefore something sacred was happening. And this is the other piece of what Girard is trying to understand. The relationship between the mimetic rivalry spins up. The problem is lack of differentiation. So the brothers are somebody gets killed. Usually one of the brothers, like you talk, but collectively, and I'm still reading now, but for example, with Romulus and Remus for the founding of Rome, they battle, but first Remus is killed by the crowd, the Interba, there's the crowd. Then Romulus founds Rome, but then he apparently in the stories is also killed. It's the cleanest version is Julius Caesar is killed by the whole group of the senators, and that founds the empire. There needs to be a collective murder.
Yeah, men in togas need to shank in the Senate.
Something. And that, I mean, Girard's super duper terrifying insight into human civilization is, it's sort of Freudian, and he does agree with some of what happens in Moses, is it Totem Taboo or the other one? That at the back of all of our mythologies is a collective murder, which then is forgotten by the crowd. In the simplest scapegoat version, the scapegoat is blamed, as the victim is made guilty, right? We talked about the sin chicken a while ago, right? You throw all your sins on the scapegoat, the sin chicken. It's completely guilty, and this, and I don't understand the mechanism yet that Girard's trying to describe, but somehow that collective murder resolves the crisis, and you can have peace again.
So this happened in the Exodus. With the Hebrews, when Moses was negotiating the Exodus out of Egypt, and then we have the first Passover, when the angel of death comes through and kills the firstborn. So that's a foundational myth which is based in mass killing. And that was the only way to differentiate Hebrew and Egyptian, because up until that point, there was no way. And then the Lord said to Moses, and he told everyone, you kill the lamb and you put the blood on the lintel, and then I will know who is who, Hebrew or Egyptian. And then we lock our doors and we wait. Yeah. It's Pasha. It all goes back to Pasha. We're in Egypt.
Well, I showed you that Girard says that.
Yeah. Yeah.
that we end up in Egypt. The Gospels are the way out. trust us. but to get to the real revelation that is the Gospels is astonishing, right? Because the sense of the innocence of the victim, Girard says, of Christ, is like impossible in world history. It's the only time that it's ever not been the scapegoating mechanism that he's trying to describe. And he's, again, I'm still reading, and you're gonna get pieces of this as we carry on through our story training, that in the mythologies of the gods are this is also the problem of like, where does evil come from? What's interesting about this is the mythological gods are somehow bad people, right? Bad character, you know, they like do horrible things, right? Rape and murder and kill either kids. And something that Girard is trying to understand is like, at the root of all of this is this collective murder that human beings, I think, you know, if we are evolved, which we're not, but whatever, the problem of human violence is really, really tricky. Because the other thing is, I keep thinking about Lord of the Flies and the when they kill Piggy, that this kind of collective frenzy of the mob, which is what we're all afraid of always, the lynching or the, you know,
Yes.
oh, you know, the white supremacists are about to like let loose on everybody. It haunts us. It haunts humanity. And yet it also is the thing that makes the sacred. And again, I'm a little, so anyway, I've got Patriot Trader up here. The thing that they were all clear that the Capitol building itself was sacred. It was a sacred space, something, right? And when I was watching that, I was thinking, it's the law that's enacted there, it's the building, it's the something. They were contesting over the sacred, and something died that day in the Capitol on January 6th. I mean, nothing has been the same since. Something got killed that day. I'm not saying Ashley Babbitt. It's not an actual person that's being killed, but there was some kind of collective something.
It was totemic death. The totem of America died.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's why everyone's spiraling now. Because you can't function without totem. There is no such thing as a tribe or a clan or a nation without totem.
I'm not sure Girard got to that point. That would make more sense so
I'm thinking of it like that.
I think you're right. So the conservative liberal is like, there's a totemic something of England that my class and I spent this quarter trying to, you know, it's like, where do you locate it? Interestingly, it's always outside. It's in a story that they tell stories about themselves. The reason Geoffrey Monmouth and this King Arthur story became so popular was partly because he links England with Troy. That he has Brutus coming from Troy. The Britons are Trojans.
But it's see, it may not historically be accurate, but you need that that mythological thread in order to be psychologically functional, right? Because otherwise you're cast adrift in the ocean of time without any way of orientating in it. So you're back in dream time without any song lines to navigate your way through it, and you can't function without song lines, which is, I mean, for anyone who's not seen this the arc before, Australia runs on dream time. Prior to British colonialism, there's this concept in the Aboriginal mythology where it's past, present, and future all at once, all at the same time, all running concurrently, which makes zero sense to white people until you realize that you're doing it on the internet all the freaking time. So the tribes had this interconnected kind of living tapestry of music that they had to learn and reproduce, and it was called songlines, and it was all linked, and the idea was that they would navigate the geography of both space and time using this oral tradition as navigational mythology. So when the British arrive, they cut the song lines, which means they've cutting the living oral mythology of all of the tribes and then interrupting this back and forth. So if you think about it, it's like being on the internet with everybody completely free to say whatever they wanted to say and have the kind of natural rhythm of conversation flowing everywhere, and then all of a sudden having a kind of big tech event where you have this big tech body place its foot into the internet and then all of a sudden cut the free exchange of information everywhere, and all of these people are getting deplatformed, and suddenly you're losing the threads of being able to navigate between chat rooms and platforms and log spaces, and it's like the geography of the internet is suddenly dissolved. You don't have any map to navigate it because everybody's losing it. So that's what happened here. So what you're describing happens to the English is what happened here when the English arrives here. It's cutting mythological navigational tools off, which they then have a hard time replacing because we've rejected the ultimate mythology. But it makes sense. The English needed to be Trojans, otherwise they can't navigate in Dreamtime. They've lost it. So, yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
They're really ocean people. Yeah.
But that I started saying that I enjoyed or was captivated by the ads and their juxtapositions because of the history, myth, history. And then realizing that is what all of this is. It's the tapping into our motivations for ending up in the rivalries, the psychological spiritual mechanism that generates them, the mimesis. I mean, the instability of history. The other thing I'm sort of reading Girard in the pause between volumes of Strauss's Life of Jesus critically examined. And what the interesting thing about Strauss's critically examining the Gospels is finding out how none of them make sense if you try to do them like a railroad timetable. That the different nativity stories won't work because this event can't have happened if that one did. And it's all trying to be, I've got Empire Nation. We'll go to rational, superstitious, rational, right? And I'm reading Strauss and trying to figure out, how do I answer this? Because I know that Christ anchors history. That has to happen. And Girard is showing the way in which the Gospels undo all of this scapegoating and mythology. We'll try on Girard and then see whether he actually persuades completely. But that Strauss is trying to make the Gospels historical in the sense of these two things are both described as happening at the same time, therefore they cancel each other out, therefore it's only myth. And yet what Girard is saying is, because of the recognition of what the scapegoat is, which is innocent, the Gospels as a revelation show the mechanism of that myth and therefore give us the possibility of living in history, which we couldn't otherwise, because otherwise we're still constantly in that dream time that you're describing. And so it's somehow both, right? It's somehow the Gospels give us the capacity to recognize our own participation in the collective murder. We crucify Christ. And in order for us to be able to see that, we also have to be able to still see the way the myth works so that it doesn't feel like history.
So this is why Christ spoke to us in parables. Because it's building us into history out of dream time. You can't remove people from the mythological in order to put them into the historical.
Well, we will now put our most powerful juxtaposition, well, second most powerful juxtaposition, salvific, satanic, salvific. What myth are we in? Okay, so salvific in this one first starts with the Aztec sacrifice of the hearts to the sun, which is entirely rational, as Bartolomé de las Casas argued, because they're one, making the ultimate sacrifice of human life, and that's rational.
Yep.
And two, and this is intriguingly a Spanish drawing of the practice, so the Christians drawing the sacrifice, showing the way the heart is carried up on this blood, on the blood. The heart's flying up into the air and going to the sun, because the blood from the sacrifices was said to feed the sun, which Girard also talks about the problem of the collective murder of the gods in the sun sacrifice, right? The sun has, it's complicated, but the gods sacrifice another god in order for there to be a sun. And in the mythology or metaphysics here, the sacrifices of the human beings feed the sun, which will go out otherwise. It's completely rational. Whereas many have a very difficult...
Eat the bugs. I was thinking eat the bugs and, keep your carbon footprint down.
Yes, like that. Right? There's feed the sun. Don't feed the sun.
The sun will get too hot.
The sun will get too hot otherwise. The satanic, of course, everyone, who's not Christian, and some who are Christian but not Catholic, think, oh, this is all satanic. It's St. Gregory's Mass. Done in feathers, right? This is actually at the Metropolitan, although not on exhibit, and is made by a Nahuatl artist to give as a gift to the Pope. So there you go. I like my juxtaposition here. It's showing the vision that St. Gregory has, allegedly, of Christ with the instruments of the Passion. So both very bloody sacrifices, obviously. One represented by the Christians of the I don't even know what the right word is. Pagan will get me in trouble. Heathen, infidel, no. Not Christian. It's salvific because it's feeding the sun. The Mass, the Protestants would reject this kind of representation of, and everybody else would consider like, oh, you worship a guy stuck on a cross. Aren't you the weird ones? Or worse. But from a Christian perspective, no. The Mass is the salvific offering, and the offering of the hearts to the demons is satanic. Break us out of this one.
I keep thinking about the Kaaba in Saudi Arabia for some reason, so I don't know what that's about, but I'll get there. Okay.
Time.
I'm being summoned. The salvific and the satanic.
Talk about a twinning, right?
What a twin. It's a problem of will. Oh, go away. It's a problem of will. Both have human sacrifice, because Christ is sacrificed for us. I'm thinking of the object. It's the reset. The mob, in both cases, have human beings murdered to appease the deity. To shift all of the energy of their panic over some impending disaster onto that particular object of sacrifice. So the mechanism is the same, because in the American example, They're worried the sun is going to go out unless they offer it blood and hearts. In the case of what happened in Judea, they're trying to anchor. Everybody's trying to anchor themselves in a existential chaos. They're still having the same kind of crisis.
It's I mean, in Girard's vision, it's going to be the same kind because we're human and we keep finding ourselves in that crisis. The chat is thinking, Casey, self-sacrifice versus involuntary sacrifice. Well, what's interesting is that in the Aztec, or in the Spanish accounts of what the Aztec thought they were doing, they say that the victims actually offer themselves, which is an interesting problem. And the Girard plays, talks about that. It's like, who are we to disbelieve that? But on the other hand, what the crowd says, the crowd needs to believe that they're voluntary. But we say Christ is voluntary too. So that's a Casey's just right. God sacrifices himself. Cain sacrifices Abel. This is where the break, the sort of, okay. So one of the things that people are, often asking, can God die? And this is one of the things Girard's trying to understand. It's like God is in that moment of violence somehow. The sacred is there. Maybe not God, but the sacred, right? The sacred is this. It rises from this moment of collective violence because it's the thing that brings peace somehow. And therefore, the God who is both source of the crisis is also the resolution of the crisis. And again, I'm not quite sure where Girard hypothesizes God comes from, because he does end up Christian after this long journey in his own meditations. And seeing Christ as, it's like he's trying to see how Christ is in fact the only way out. It's like fundamentally the only way out of this cycle of escalating rivalries.
Well, that makes sense because he's crucified on Golgotha, which is the place of the skull. So it's the death of Adam and Eve and the rivalry for knowledge. We have the envy of the serpent introducing this fruit to Eve, and then Adam obviously doesn't want to miss out, so he takes it. That's the place where Christ ends up crucified. So the resolution to this happens at Calvary, because the energy has to be directed.
So we have surgery suggesting the way to break the cycle of mimetic violence is martyrdom. Yes, but we need to understand why it works. It's actually, so we have one last, this is a view from a different perspective. He's recognizing that in all of the other juxtapositions, we've been looking at them, right? So we stand outside of them, as it were, and can't resolve them or get ourselves caught up in them. In this one, I have Tissot's image of Christ what Christ saw from the cross. So you see his feet with Mary Magdalene at the bottom of it, and then the crowd that Christ from the cross sees. And what does Christ see when he's on the cross? Does he see good and bad? Another layer of what Girard starts to understand is the way in which the scapegoat, the victim, becomes a monster. Monsters, we're going to end up with monster killers in all of this, right? That it's appropriate for heroes to fight monsters, and this is one of the things that I've meditated on because Tolkien and Beowulf, and he has this sort of, in his great Beowulf and the Critics essays, thinking about why the monsters have to be monstrous, right? It really matters that Grendel is a cannibal, although he's descended from Cain. so he's not really human, but he is,
Yeah.
right? But that he needs, and that the Cain and his mother Grendel and his mother have to be monsters, and then the dragon has to be a monster, and so they have to be monsters in order for the hero's victory over them to have the right kind of energy, as we're thinking about this. But in myths like the Oedipus, Girard spends a lot of time on Oedipus and the scapegoat. He's thinking about how Oedipus deserves to die because he's murdered his father and married his mother, and he's the reason for the plague. So this gets us around to the COVID, right? It's like, who was the reason for the plague? And you all may be wondering why we don't have, certain people on trial right now, because they were clearly the generators of the stories behind the decisions that were made. My prediction right now is there's not going to be a big uproar against them. And I'm thinking that Girard is possibly the one who has the insight to why. It's like, after the war is over, it's not necessarily the war criminals that get put on trial. Something else. Somebody else gets caught up because the group who has participated in the collective violence needs a scapegoat, needs to not feel that it was at fault.
They have to have the catharsis of scapegoating somebody.
Yep.
It's about catharsis. Yep.
Which, from this perspective, rather puts a different light on Nazis, but we'll do that some other time. I mean, it's like the Nazis are definitely the you put all of the Nuremberg trials, right? We put all of the crimes that happened in the war on the Nazis at those trials.
Yeah,
all of them.
Well, there's never a discussion on what anyone else was up to. I mean, even from the perspective of the other Axis powers,
right?
It's just sort of whoosh, like no one, we don't have a discussion with Italians about the same kind of things that you'd have a discussion with the Germans about. And virtually no one in Australia gives a thought to the Japanese, So it's interesting. It's like they've taken on
They got to be Hans or we the baddies.
Yeah,
they're the ones covered in skulls.
Yeah,
It's in the United States somehow. I mean, I was looking at that graph that was circulating today about how the birth rates in Japan have plummeted.
Oh yeah, sterile Japan.
I wonder who dropped bombs on them. And there's there's
a rather spicy one too.
Collectively, all sorts of things that we're starting to recognize the United States was participating in.
Yeah.
Hans, are we the baddies? And yet nothing ever happens, right? It's like, so this is kind of, I've got you guys to the edge of where I'm thinking about right now. It's like, why isn't there going to be a massive outcry against the people who brought us the lockdowns, the people who brought us those demonstrations, not vaccines, the people that convinced you all to wear masks? Right now, it does not feel like everybody in the conspiracy theory part of the world wants to say, that the trials are starting soon, but that's not actually what happened. For example, after the French Revolution, right? Robespierre's got his head cut off, and then it all evaporates.
Yep. The energy just disappears.
Yep.
Dissipated, because the focus point's gone. So the orientation is lost. The orientation of the mass, the orientation of the crowd is gone. So the energy dissipates.
Right.
So without the hate muse, it doesn't really exist. Everybody returns to the amnesia of...
Well, okay, so another of the stories that Girard analyzes in Scapegoat is Cadmus and the dragon teeth. So Cadmus in Thebes kills the plague, right? The plague images in all of this. Obviously, plague, somehow. COVID, whatever it was. Had the psychological psycho-spiritual mythological presence of plague, even though we know it probably wasn't. Probably certainly wasn't. So it's there as the plague, so we need something to fight it. Cadmus kills the dragon and takes its teeth and sews the teeth, and they become armies. And then the armies are, they're going to rampage around Thebes, and so he throws a pebble in the middle of them, and they fight each other to the death. And it's the pebble, right? It's like just he having slain the dragon and then created a new dragon problem, throws a pebble in, and the armies kill each other. Thebes is saved.
New thing, new distraction.
Well, more that there isn't actually it's like the mimetic rivalry has dissipated, and therefore there's nothing to fight about.
Gone.
Yeah. And insofar as I don't right now in my sensitivity to stuff, sensitive or not as it is, I don't feel it. It feels like everybody's in the amnesia, and we're trying to do the historical thing and make sure that we mark stuff and say what happened and things like that. But my study of history and my memory of after World War I mean, okay, Germany collapsed for a bit, but the 1920s are surreal in the degree to which World War I's gone, right? Tolkien and Lewis try to write mythology about it, but otherwise,
Roaring 20s. No one worried about. Yep.
The baby boom in the 50s, they come right after World War II.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's this weird kind of, once the sacrifice is the victim is killed, the scapegoat is killed. So I'm not sure with the COVID stuff what the scapegoat was, whether it's in fact the entire children, the children who were all forced into masks and on Zoom for 3 years, which is a pretty big child sacrifice.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I'm still sort of thinking this through.
Hold on, I'm gonna plug this in. It's not working.
Anyway, we're all monsters. Right? And what I'm meditating on this one, what Christ sees from the cross is humans and monsters, monsters and humans. And you can, worry about whether those labels are on top of the Pharisees or the Romans or the mob or whatever. But what Christ sees from the cross is good, bad, bad, good. It's the crowd.
The crowd is just a bunch of blood-sucking vampires.
We'll go back to humans, monsters, monsters, humans, if you like that one.
Yeah.
And then we are faced with the real problem. This, what is evil, right? Satan has a role in this. Satan is definitely a force and a reality. But the reality of it is, remember we were talking about the demons in the desert, whether they're our thoughts or external to us?
Yeah.
If Solzhenitsyn is right in the line of good and evil goes to the heart of every human being, the evil is in us, and this will be, I think, the thing that we need to leave everybody meditating on now. Casey is trying Salem, Nuremberg, Salem. Yes, something there.
Nice.
Yes, very nice. Bishop saying, that was a mic drop statement, that Nazis the scapegoat. Well, we aim to please, or startle or horrify. Keep you in the mythological, so that you are not settling in. Don't get caught up in these spiraling rivalries, because you will be the crowd incapable of seeing itself.
Give us Barabbas.
That's what Christ saw from the cross.
Yeah. We will have no king but Caesar.
And this is what Girard sees, and this is what he says. The Gospels are a revelation of the scapegoat was innocent. no other mythology cannot see that. They always come up with ways of making the scapegoat either responsible or vanishing the, they either make the scapegoat responsible or vanish the crowd murder, one way or the other. And I mean, vanishing the crowd murder is very, very typical, I think. It's like you can't see. He says, like in Socrates, when Socrates dies, the philosophers escape because they're there with him being friends. They're not administering the dose, right? It's just those evil Athenians. So telling the story so that we are no longer responsible, right?
Yeah.
The World War II, the atrocities of World War II, people are starting to wake up and being able to see them. The atomic bomb was definitely one or two. The firebombing that the British and the Americans engaged in was definitely another. That insofar as the crowd can't see its own guilt, we crucified Christ.
Yeah.
Hans, are we the baddies?
We are the monsters.
We are the monsters.
Yeah.
We're going to leave you with that thought now. To be continued. Thank you for joining us.